Did you know that many of Hollywood's most iconic stars from the golden age lived double lives, worshipped on screen but hiding their true selves off camera? Behind polished smiles and perfectly staged romances were identities kept under lock and key. This is the story of 14 legendary stars, men who lit up the screen but dared not reveal who they really were. Until now. Let's begin with the man whose name became synonymous with rugged masculinity, Rock Hudson. Rock Hudson, the poster boy with 2 lives. To the world, Rock Hudson was everything a leading man should be. 6'4", dimpled, deep-voiced. But behind the name Rock was Roy Fitzgerald, a man living in fear. Studio fixer Henry Wilson taught him how to walk, talk, and pose like the fantasy women adored. When tabloids threatened to out him in 1955, the studio staged a quick marriage to Phyllis Gates. The truth stayed buried until midnight. After dark, Malibu parties transformed. Photographers out, young men in. There, Rock was no longer a statue. He was himself. In 1984, when Hudson revealed he had AIDS, the industry could no longer deny the truth. His scribbled note said it best. "I won't apologize for living the life that lets me breathe." Tab Hunter was the all-American boy, blonde hair, shy grin, the face of 1950s innocence. Warner Bros. Loved it. But when police raided a Hollywood party full of male dancers, panic set in. To protect the image, the studio paired him with Natalie Wood for staged dates. She joked later, "I deserved overtime pay." Behind the cameras, though, Tab was falling. Not for Natalie, but for Anthony Perkins. They roller skated through Paramount lots, traded love letters, and ducked out of taxis separately to avoid the press. But fear ran deep. Tab lived with panic attacks. His horse, Harlow, was the only soul who didn't care who he kissed. When Tab finally told the truth in his 2005 memoir, it wasn't scandal, it was sunlight. Critics called it the most heartwarming coming out Hollywood ever produced. To most of the world, Anthony Perkins was Norman Bates, nervous, polite, chilling. But the real fear in his life wasn't on screen. It was exposure. Shy and thoughtful, Perkins spent off hours sketching costumes and learning French. He met Tab Hunter at a beach party and sparks quietly flew. But love wasn't safe. His own agent warned him, "One rumor and you're done." So Perkins played the part. Public lunches with Audrey Hepburn, staged photos with actresses, private walks in Central Park, always looking over his shoulder. Even Alfred Hitchcock noticed. He never brings girls to set. He stays in character. Later, Perkins married photographer Barry Berenson and had 2 sons. But after his death in 1992, his journals revealed the truth. He still dreamed of Tab's laugh. In the end, Perkins lived like Norman Bates, behind locked doors in a house no one was allowed to enter. In the 1920s, Ramiro Navaro's face adorned every theater. MGM sculpted him as the next Latin lover, sensual, exotic, untouchable. But off-screen, Navaro preferred quiet nights with composer friends, dinners where Cole Porter played piano, and gentle company far from studio control. Studio chief Louis B. Mayer feared scandal more than failure. He sent bodyguards, not for protection, but surveillance. When pressured about marriage, Navaro replied calmly, "My only mistress is the rosary." His friend Tallulah Bankhead teased, "Rosaries don't walk the Santa Monica Pier at midnight, darling." In 1968, Navaro was brutally murdered by 2 brothers chasing a rumor of hidden cash. The tabloids screamed. But years later, historians read his diaries and found only gratitude. "If fame was camouflage," he wrote, "it still let me kiss beautiful men beneath the moon." He galloped across silent screens with glory. But in truth, it was the quiet, stolen nights that mattered most. William "Billy" Haynes was Hollywood's original rebel, a wisecracking romantic lead who refused to play by anyone's rules. MGM adored his charisma until they found out who he really loved. When a scandal threatened to break, studio boss Louis B. Mayer gave him an ultimatum. Marry a woman or lose everything. Billy lit a cigarette, smirked, and said, "I'm already married." His partner, Jimmy Shields, was waiting at home. The studio dropped him. Hollywood shut its doors. But Billy didn't shrink. He reinvented. He and Jimmy became sought-after interior designers, transforming mansions for Joan Crawford and Ronald Reagan. Crawford later said, "They were the happiest married couple in Hollywood." In 1936, anti-gay thugs attacked their home. The pair fought them off with garden hoses and biting wit. Billy never returned to the screen. But when he died in 1973, Joan Crawford held Jimmy's hand and whispered, U2 beat the system. Intense, vulnerable, real. But behind those soulful eyes was a man quietly suffocating under Hollywood's expectations. Studios tried everything to pair him with female starlets. He declined, politely but firmly. His real weekends were spent jamming jazz with playwrights and hosting private dinners with handsome photographers. His closest confidant? Elizabeth Taylor, who called him Bessie May during late-night gossip sessions. But after a brutal car crash in 1956 disfigured his face, the mask cracked. Addiction, grief, and guilt consumed him. Friends whispered that the accident wasn't the only thing that broke him. It was the years of hiding who he truly was. After his death in 1966, a forgotten essay he once wrote finally surfaced. The saddest thing I know is loving quietly. The happiest too. Monty lived and loved in the shadows, but on screen, his pain became immortal. Sal Mineo burst onto the scene in Rebel Without a Cause as Plato, the wide-eyed boy with a quiet ache. Audiences felt it, because it was real. Off-screen, Sal was in love with James Dean. His diary confessed it plainly. He looks at me and I forget my lines. But Hollywood wasn't ready. Publicists forced him into staged dates with Natalie Wood. Sal played along, later laughing. We mostly talked about how handsome Jimmy was. As the 60s rolled in, his boyish charm faded, and roles dried up. So he turned to theater. In Fortune and Men's Eyes, he played a gay inmate, raw and unapologetic. Critics praised his courage. Hollywood ignored it. On a February night in 1976, Sal was stabbed outside his apartment. Police first suspected a hate crime. Later, a mugger was arrested. He didn't even know who Sal was. He died a forgotten rebel. But today, Sal Mineo is remembered for something braver than fame. Honesty. Carrie Grant was Hollywood perfection, suave, witty, and impossibly charming. But behind the screen idol known as Carrie, there was still Archie Leach, and a lifelong love that didn't make the headlines. Throughout the 1930s, Grant shared a beach house with actor Randolph Scott. The press dubbed it Bachelor Hall, and printed photos of the two grilling in matching aprons. When gossip columnist Hedda Hopper asked about wedding plans, Carrie quipped, "Who says I'm not already married to Randolph?" Studios panicked. They staged relationships, Carole Lombard, Barbara Hutton, 5 wives in total, but none eclipsed Randolph. Ex-wives later joked that Grant's fiercest rival wasn't a woman, but the lanky cowboy in the guest room. He never labeled himself. But letters to Scott told the real story. Inside jokes, recipes, and memories of our little hideaway. Carrie once said, "Even I want to be Carrie Grant." Maybe because the real man, the one who laughed freely in that cottage by the sea, was the one no one ever got to see. James Dean didn't just act, he exploded. On screen, on highways, in hearts. Gone at 24, he became a myth. But behind the leather jacket and defiant stare was a man far more complicated than the rebel Hollywood painted. Before fame, he was close to radio director Rogers Brackett, perhaps too close for 1950s comfort. Gossip circles whispered. Joe Hyams, a tabloid reporter, claimed Dean once said, "Why should I care what people think? I'm not going to live forever." Studios pushed a fairy tale romance with actress Pier Angeli, but Dean watched her wedding from across the street, brooding alone. Friends later said, "She loved the legend, not the man." After his fatal crash, a safety deposit box revealed handwritten poems signed with male initials and a photograph of Dean kissing another man backstage. Was it friendship? Was it love? Was it freedom in secret? James Dean left too fast for the world to decide. But in every smoldering close-up, every stormy glare, lies a question he never answered, because he never had to. George Nader had the look, square jaw, bright eyes, warm charm. Universal saw him as the next Rock Hudson. But Hollywood isn't kind to those who live honestly. When Tabloid Confidential threatened to expose Hudson, agent Henry Wilson made a chilling trade. He fed them a false story about George Nader to protect Rock. Nader's career stalled overnight. From rising star to forgotten man, sacrificed for another's survival. But George didn't retreat. He built a quiet, full life with his partner, Mark Miller, and their Doberman, Arno. They hosted legendary Sunday brunches filled with laughter, sangria, and quiet defiance. In 1978, George wrote Chrome, a pulp sci-fi novel with 2 openly gay male heroes. A first. When asked why he did it, he simply said, "I already lost one career to rumors. Why not build a new one with truth?" George Nader didn't just survive Hollywood's cruelty, he rewrote the rules of what it means to be a leading man. Tyrone Power dazzled as Hollywood's ultimate swashbuckler, the mark of Zorro, blood and sand, dashing across screens with fire and finesse. But behind the swordplay was a heart weighed down by secrets. During World War II, he bonded deeply with fellow Marines. Letters home were filled with veiled affection, coated with longing. After the war, rumors swirled, especially around his closeness with actor Cesar Romero. Columnists noted their vacations together. No women, just cigars, smiles, and silence. Fox panicked. They arranged marriages, first to actress Annabella, then to Deborah Menardos. Even Annabella admitted, Tyrone's favorite evenings were always with his male friends, not me. He died suddenly in 1958, collapsing on set while filming a sword duel. Among his belongings was a pressed gardenia from Romero's garden and a leather-bound diary, filled not with roles, but with birthdays of close companions. Whether lovers or soulmates, Tyrone Power's truest intimacy may have unfolded far from the screen, in the quiet rooms where cameras never rolled. Van Johnson was MGM's golden boy, freckles, choir boy charm, the face that sold war bonds by the truckload. To the public, he was the all-American sweetheart. Behind the scenes, the truth was far more complex. In 1943, a car crash left him scarred. While recovering, rumors swirled, he wasn't convalescing alone. Dancer Keenan Wynn was by his side, and shortly after, Van married Wynn's ex-wife, Eve Abbott. A classic lavender marriage, orchestrated by none other than studio mogul Louis B. Mayer. On paper, Van was the perfect husband, but insiders knew his poker nights were filled with chorus boys, not leading ladies. Later in life, he relocated to Palm Springs and shared a home with decorator Charles Boswell, whom he fondly called my roommate of record and cook extraordinaire. He never officially came out, but on a late 70s talk show, Van winked and said, "Freckles hide a multitude of secrets." The audience laughed, never realizing they were hearing the quietest truth of all. Before Netflix, before prestige dramas, there was Dr. Kildare, and Richard Chamberlain made stethoscopes sexy. With sculpted features and calm charisma, he was America's TV crush. But behind the fame was a man pretending off-screen more than on. For decades, tabloids chased him. Photos with ingenues, public appearances with female co-stars, always polished, always distant. Yet in Hawaii, far from flashing cameras, Chamberlain lived quietly with actor-producer Martin Rabbit in a lush estate they nicknamed Paradise Found. The world didn't know, not officially. In 1989, The Advocate outed him. Chamberlain panicked, denied, retreated. But in 2003, he finally told the truth in his memoir, Shattered Love. The closet is a suffocating coffin. I needed sunlight. He had feared the truth would destroy his career, but fans embraced him. He continued to act, garden, paint watercolors, and live. Richard Chamberlain's greatest performance wasn't as a doctor or a prince. It was stepping into the role of his real self. And the spotlight finally felt warm. Farley Granger lit up the screen in Hitchcock's Rope, handsome, mischievous, dangerous. Stardom came fast, and so did the rumors. But Farley didn't run from them. He danced through them. He dated singer Shelley Winters and playwright Arthur Lawrence, sometimes in the same week. He never cared for labels, only honesty. His rule? If the kiss feels right, that's enough. Studios tried molding him into a macho heartthrob. He politely declined. Broadway offered something better, freedom. In 1953, he met Robert Calhoun during a soap opera audition. They stayed together nearly 50 years. When asked late in life about his past, Farley laughed, "Past, darling? I'm still alive." Long before rainbow flags and hashtags, Farley Granger lived fluid, fearless, and free. He didn't just survive Hollywood, he outlived its rules. Clifton Webb brought wit to every frame, whether scolding in Laura or fussing in Cheaper by the Dozen. But off-screen, he lived a life as refined and as mysterious as the characters he played. He never married. He lived with his formidable mother, Mabel, well into adulthood. Gossip columns had a field day, dubbing him Hollywood's Prince Hamlet. When MGM suggested a fake romance, Webb raised an eyebrow and replied, "My dear, the only suitable match for me is society itself." He sipped martinis with Cole Porter, exchanged sharp quips at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and wrote affectionate letters to nieces, illustrated with cats in top hats. Though he never came out, those who knew him never needed confirmation. He was elegance personified, untouched by scandal. When he died in 1966, Mabel followed a year later. Hollywood sighed. Its most elegant secret went with him. But if ghosts wear tuxedos and sip dry martinis, Clifton Webb is surely still among us, ever composed, ever unapologetically himself. Nyungsu thut dugdugnen de jo motraitim, thundered objection. As Perry Mason, Raymond Burr crafted something more intricate than any legal argument, his public persona. He told the press he'd been married. Twice, had a son, lost them all, but none of it was true. No marriage license, no child, just carefully built fiction. Why? Because early in his career, RKO fired him over rumors of a Navy romance. So Burr rewrote his life, story by story, until it shielded him. In truth, he spent 35 years with fellow actor Robert Benavides. Together, they raised orchids, ran a vineyard, and quietly built a life of love and beauty. A rare orchid they bred bore a hidden name tag, Phalaenopsis roberta, a secret tribute to Robert. At cast barbecues, Burr would simply introduce him as my partner. No speeches, no apologies. When the LA Cat Times finally mentioned the relationship in Burr's 1993 obituary, fans said, "We always knew." And maybe that's the legacy. Sometimes love doesn't need to be shouted to be heard. Paul Lynde lit up screens with his razor-sharp one-liners on Hollywood squares and his scene-stealing antics in Bewitched. Behind the camp and the cackles, however, lived a man aching for acceptance he could never publicly claim. He called gay bars church socials and sipped martinis like sermons. His jokes were double entendres, each one a lifeline tossed into hostile waters. Q, what does it mean when someone sees a flying saucer? A, it means they've been to one cocktail party too many. Offstage, Lynde was deeply private. After a 1965 incident, his lover fell, or possibly jumped from a hotel balcony. Paul sank deeper into alcohol and solitude. Friends remembered his golden retrievers. He named them all Harry. He showered them with the tenderness he rarely showed himself. At his death in 1982, fellow comedian Peter Marshall said, "Paul gave the world laughter and kept the tears backstage. He never came out, but his humor carved space in America's living rooms for a truth he wasn't allowed to speak, so he made it sparkle instead." Danny Kaye danced, sang, joked, and dazzled his way through the 1940s and 50s, elastic-faced, golden-voiced, and beloved worldwide. But behind the giddy gibberish and whirlwind charm was a life of careful sidesteps and coded glances. Rumors swirled about a deep connection with Sir Laurence Olivier, whispered in Noel Coward's diaries, and Vivien Leigh's jealous remarks. Kaye, ever the performer, simply grinned. "My private life is like my Inchworm song. Sweet, simple, and on repeat." He married songwriter Sylvia Fine, traveled the world for UNICEF, and kept an apartment in London that, according to some, was decorated entirely by Olivier's favorite designer. Kaye never denied the whispers, but never confirmed them either. When asked about the stories, he winked. A rumor is just a story that hasn't found its punchline. In the end, Danny Kaye remained an enigma wrapped in applause, his truth floating somewhere between the spotlight and the wings. Sir Laurence Olivier, knight of the British stage, thunderous Shakespearean titan, 3-time Oscar winner. To the world, he was mastery in motion. But beyond the curtain, his life was full of performances no playwright could script. He married Vivien Leigh, built the National Theatre, reigned as Britain's leading man. But letters, whispers, and knowing glances told a different story. Noel Coward joked about love notes starting with "Beloved Danny," a nod to Olivier's rumored closeness with Danny Kaye. At bohemian soirees in post-war London, he mingled with gay poets and actors, brandy swirling more freely than tea. When asked about the gossip, Olivier deflected with a smirk. "True actors bare their souls on stage. Why should we strip anywhere else?" Vivien Leigh herself, candid about her own bisexual crushes, never denied the subtleties of their marriage. It was artistic, intimate, maybe more, maybe less. In his autobiography, Olivier wrote one line that said everything and nothing. All the world's a stage, and the stalls are always full of rumor. Sir could recite Shakespeare with breathless beauty while tying a perfect bow tie. But in 1953, one misstep nearly shattered his legacy. He was arrested for importuning in a London public lavatory. The tabloids pounced. Scandal loomed. But then came opening night. As Gilg Good stepped on stage in A Day by the Sea, the audience rose to its feet in thunderous applause. He wept mid-monologue. British theater had spoken. Genius mattered more than shame. From that day on, Gilg Good never hid, but he laughed with cutting charm. "I never go to public loos now," he quipped. "I might run into critics." He spent decades with his partner, Martin Hensler, traveling, collecting antiques, sending cheeky Christmas cards with Shakespeare and Santa hats. He lived quietly, elegantly, defiantly. Knighted, celebrated, and beloved to the very end, Gilg Good proved something extraordinary. Even in a world that tries to silence you, truth delivered in a velvet voice can still bring the house down.